obviously the best time to do this is not right when you need it, right? You got to put a runway in front of yourself. And it's not just the technology. We also know it's the skills and the culture. Remote first is kind of where we are now. If you had to do this at the last responsible moment, enable a program like this for the next time, how much lead time do you need to really do this right? Is it 5 years? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at perhaps my users, they're not using technology because they want to. In fact, you could just do a quick Google search for physician burnout, and one of the key things they'll hit is electronic medical record and their usage of technology, which is a huge, interesting topic in of itself. I won't spend too much time on it, but we do have kind of a lack of either desire or lack of ability to use technology effectively. So I think that did provide some challenges, not with our ability to turn on the technology, but more people, processes, and rollout. And to be honest, I think just the messaging around what we're doing and what we're not doing as it relates to these technologies. And to give you some context, we have roughly 4,000 students on the university side, also about 400 or 4,000 staff members, so FTEs. Then on the clinical side, 1,000 physicians, and then 8,000 FTEs. And if you look at our rollout, we have 16,000 using BYOD devices in our MDM. So that's Workspace ONE. We have about 3,000 unique users accessing applications through a portal, also the Workspace ONE portal. And that's where we can kind of create a seamless access to client server technologies like our electronic medical record, then also web-based technologies. So if you think of those numbers of adoption based on our employees and our number of physicians, you'll see a high level of adoption. To get that, we had to assure everyone that we weren't listening to their phone calls, we weren't tracking their their banking applications. We had to do a lot of education on what we
had to build their trust and confidence to get that level of adoption, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was surprising to me how much we had to spend in person, myself and my chief information security officer, talking with very high level physicians, assuring them that we weren't doing things, to the point where we'd log into the console and say, yes, we do track data, but it's all metadata. What version you're running, what apps have you installed, MAC address, those sorts of things. And then once they see it's in the console, they understand that, okay, when we tell you we're tracking data, it's not what you're actually doing in terms of data, but it's metadata. It's data about.
How long does that process take? I mean, it sounds like you're doing the right thing. You're doing the making your rounds, as it were, talking to users, showing them what you're doing to build the confidence. But that's got to take time. What does the lead time for that look like?
Yeah, so we started last July, and then we didn't really mandate it till October, and then we really didn't flip switches to require it till December. So roughly about a 6-month time period, and then still at this point in time, we have some laggards who decided they didn't need to do it, so they weren't accessing things from remote. So they decided not to install on their BYOD, or they didn't use our multi-factor authentication, which we're using Duo for. So they decided not to do it, and they were coming in, and that's it. Now, when they have to go work from home, it's a crisis, and we're having some of those same questions, but that's about 2 to 3% of our population. We were able to get, transformed, if you will, within that 6-month time period. And we also led it with, if you looked at how we used to do remote access, it was horrible. It was a horrible experience. It was always in the top 5 escalations. If you looked at our incidents and problems and our ITSM, a huge problem. So now we've re-architected. It's modern. It's a couple clicks. It's what they experience from our banking and things of that nature. So we started to see this kind of shift of concern to people telling their peers to do it because it was easier and it was better and just trust us. So that was also.
But we're talking something that you did essentially in about 9 months is what it sounds like. And the perfect storm hit right as you got ready. Is that right?
Yeah, we were just talking about this as an IT leadership group yesterday. We were all thankful we actually did it. If you would have asked me last summer if it was a good idea, I was like, gosh, I wish we wouldn't have done. There's so much drama. There's so many one-on-one conversations. But if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have been in the place we're in now. So 9 months of the project was just communication, reassurance, and support. And that's in addition to the technical work. And I didn't think it would be that long from a process communication standpoint. But that was something we definitely learned, was you have to do it. You have to do it often and in person, and usually it has to come from the top.
Christopher, what do you think? I mean, really trying to get my arms wrapped around what's the minimum viable time frame I can really make this happen. And given your experience with so many clients and inside VMware, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to something that I said before. It really depends on the mission of the organization and the business use case that what you were moving forward with. So I'll give you, an antidote, a little example here. When I was in banking, that was really about the time when electronic banking really started to take off. Consumer-based online banking had just started. We were in a crunch because larger banking institutions were gobbling up smaller banking institutions, and we were one of the small ones that wanted to survive. So in order for us to cut what our operating expenses were, we turned to technology to get people like loan officers to be able to work from home, cut down some of our space in our buildings that was very expensive for upkeep for lease-wise, and really give them the flexibility to work from wherever so that we could take advantage of their skill set regardless of where they were. Fast forward into my time in healthcare, being on the other side of the desk, one of the first things that we did when we looked at a remote first culture was, where were the non-essential staff that we could actually move out of clinical space, because it's very expensive to maintain clinical space. So we sent coders home, we sent billers home. And that was, it was almost like a tragic comedy when we did this, because we were sending full PCs to their house and full VPN boxes to their homes, and expecting somebody at the time, because commercialized IT in the home, it wasn't as big as it is now, expecting somebody who knows how to code medical records by paper, not even electronically. We're expecting them to understand how to plug all this technology in and be up and running and be productive that very next day. So I think it was a very lengthy process for us to understand it back then. I think now, because traditionally most people are in tune with technology, if you think about the culture that we have and what we're doing right now, my kids are fully online learning right now, just because of the nature of the world and what's happening, right?
Well, they've been living in apps, but also, don't you think that the technology itself has become much more consumerized? You don't have these unwieldy steps to go through. It's just seamless. It's just click and go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the big joke that I normally make about this is that we're still in this phase of what I call that digital divide, right? So you have the folks that are just going to fight against the technology as much as they can. And then you have a younger population who came out of the womb with a smartphone in their hand. They have to work with technology. They don't have a choice. That's just their culture. That's the way they were born and raised. So meeting their needs while also meeting the demands of what Brian said earlier, you had a couple of people that are totally against it. I completely understand that. Most of that clinician population, especially when we adopt electronic medical records and remote work, my primary care physician retired. He didn't want to do it. He was so old school that he didn't want to look at it on a screen. He wanted to have that interaction face to face.
Now we're in an era where there's no choice, right? If you want to stay working, you have no choice. You got to get work through that network. You got to get these applications running, right?
It's critical for success in the healthcare space today. If I can triage patients by using telemedicine or just even remote applications so that I can see that individual in their home, I can make a better outcome for that individual while keeping them safe and secure. I don't have to have them come into my emergency department if they don't have to be there, because I can triage them from their home. So it's significant right now to have this type of capability. And I think go back to the question, how long does it take to build this out, or what's the time frame you should be considering? You should have been considering this already. This should just be a standard part of a business continuity program. It needs to be factored into the everyday lives of how your organization works to understand where it will be successful.
Yeah, no question it's the new normal, but I think people are putting Band-Aids in place, and they're going to want to circle around and do this right.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So